In this summary presentation, we will look at Chapter 11. Now, this chapter focuses on the team itself, the dynamics that will occur within a typical project team. Certainly, we can't guarantee or assume that everything talked about in this chapter will happen in every team. But on average, these are the issues teams often face, and these are the circumstances that the team project leader will need to be able to manage in order to help the team become the effective instrument that it has the potential to become. We will begin our discussion by talking about the ideal. This will often not exist, but if opportunity presents itself to be able to select your own team or shape the construction of the team that you will be using, certainly you want to take advantage of that. And we're going to give some pointers here on the types of things you should be looking for. So if you have the option of selecting your own team, what are some typical rules you need to follow? One may seem kind of counterintuitive, but that is to keep the team as small as possible. Now, that doesn't mean you want to be understaffed. That is not the intent here at all. You certainly want to have the required critical mass on your team in order to accomplish the project to quality and on time. However, the larger a team is, the more complicated it is to manage the team. The larger a team becomes, the more potential there is for dynamic issues between team members. Therefore, if you can accomplish the project successfully with a smaller team, you certainly don't want the team to be any larger than necessary. Also, if you have an overly large team and you don't have enough work to keep everybody busy on the team, it can become even more problematic because now some people are doing less than others. This can cause hard feelings within the team. Why is that person not carrying their fair share of the work? That kind of thing happens. You want to have a team that fully utilizes all team members. Ideally, you want team members that have a positive attitude and a positive outlook on the project and what's in front of them. Now, often this is really difficult to judge because people's attitudes change moment to moment. So they may seem to have a positive attitude, but you may find out once in a stressful team situation, stressful project situation, they behave quite differently. This is where experience and past knowledge of a person can really be beneficial. The third bullet point here also can sometimes seem a little counterintuitive, and it links to the fourth bullet point. A diverse team often will ultimately produce a better product than a non-diverse team. Studies have been done on this time and time again, and these studies have spanned various industries from engineering to computer science to business to medical. Having the diversity of thought, having the diversity of approach, of outlook on the team ultimately allows the team to have a more rich and more refined solution to the project. However, bullet point number 4 also comes to play. Familiarity within the team. So homogeneity within the team. In other words, non-diversity often helps the team get up to speed more quickly. They already know each other and they already have a lot in common. A diverse team that does not have a lot in common and they're trying to get to know each other, they're dealing with the diversity issues, it takes them a little longer to speed up on the project, to ramp up to full productivity. However, ultimately they may be more productive than the team that is familiar. So there's a balance that goes on here. My general feeling is I prefer diversity over non-diversity on a team. The ultimate benefit of diversity outweighs the slight increase in productivity early on due to familiarity. Now, the information at the bottom of this slide I'm adding, I don't believe this is in the textbook, but it's information that I think is very useful, and it's information that helps you understand the nature of people. What I'm doing here at the bottom of this slide is talking about the types of team members you may come across. People on your team can fall into different categories. There are those who I would call the architects. These are the people that like thinking of all the possible solutions. They're kind of the designers, the architect of what is possible. You need people like that can come up with innovative ideas. There are people who are better at facilitating. They can mediate the decision process. They can cause interaction between people to happen more fluidly. And because of that, they can help solve problems within the project environment. There are those people who are the questioners. I call them here the devil's advocate because that's a phrase that's used often, but basically they're the individual that always points the flaws out in everything. And they can be difficult at times because they always seem to be a little negative, yet you need someone on the team that is willing to stand up and say, hey, here's a problem. This is something that doesn't make sense or you haven't thought about. Because it's better to have somebody talk about that and make it clear than for it to go unsaid and then find out about it too late. There are those men and women that are the big idea individuals. They're the ones that see things at a higher level. They also are the ones that come up with the really radical, what I would call the blue sky ideas, come up with the solutions that nobody else would think of because they are thinking far more broadly than the typical person. Some people are what I would refer to as the anchors. These are the ones that make sure the proposed plan is realistic. They make sure that the plan is worked. They make sure that things are getting done in a timely, efficient way. Basically, they're the detail people. And then finally, you have people that are good at interacting with individuals. They're basically that interpersonal expert. And so they're great at seeing things from the end user's point of view, from the customer's point of view. They're able to basically see the human side of the project better. Now, no one person is going to have all these traits, but ideally within your team, you want most, if not all of these traits to be present. Different people will have different ones. And by the way, different people can have more than one of these. People have multiple traits. But if you're missing one of these or two of these completely, it means that you have a team that's somewhat handicapped. It has basically a blind spot because it lacks that particular characteristic. We're now going to step through the stages that a team typically goes through. And the book is going to have a lot more information on this. I'm just going to hit the highlights here in the slides. I've color-coded these to help you keep them straight in your mind. We have 4 stages. We have the forming stage, when the team is first generated, storming, when things don't seem to go so well, norming, when things start stabilizing, and then finally the performing or performance stage. So these are kind of set up to where you can remember them. They kind of sound alike: forming, storming, norming, performing. And each one is typical of most teams. So in the forming stage, things seem good. People are often excited, generally have a positive attitude. They're getting to know their fellow team members. They're they're just excited that they're on a new project. It's like, wow, something new, something different. New always has a little bit of excitement to it. People don't like getting stuck in a rut and doing the same old thing. But there is also some questioning about what is this project really about. So individuals do a lot of questioning here. That means that the project manager needs to provide a lot of direction and a lot of structure to the team early on. You can't just turn them loose because they're honestly still getting their feet underneath them, so to speak, as to how is this team going to function? What are we really doing? How is this going to work? Especially if they haven't known each other or worked together in the past. It is important to realize that in this stage, not a lot of work gets done. It's more about the team coming together than it is work getting done. Now, a little bit will get done, but not a lot. In the next stage, it seems like things are getting worse. In the storming stage, basically the team members start testing each other and testing the project manager. They're kind of seeing how far can they push things and get away with it. Conflict often can come up because people start realizing that they don't necessarily like all of their team members as they get to know them, and motivation and morale can actually decrease. And productivity certainly doesn't ramp up very quickly during this stage. The project manager needs to be very careful in this stage. This can be a very high risk stage. And most teams do go through this stage. Basically, as a project manager, you have to have thick skin in this stage. The team is probably going to not get along, not be very functional, and probably blame a lot of it on you, the project manager. So you have to try to not become defensive. Try to understand that this is natural for teams to work through and that they're going to move beyond it, and help provide support and direction to help them move through it. The quicker you can basically set aside your own emotions and your own pride and work with the team and help them come together, the quicker you're going to get through this stage and move on to the stages you want to be in. So it really comes down to tolerating what you don't want to have to tolerate during this storming phase. We then come to the norming stage. This is when things start picking back up a little bit. People start working out their differences. So conflicts are getting resolved. People are starting to at least get along. Now, that doesn't mean everybody's going to be best friends. It doesn't mean they're going to hang out after work, but they've at least learned to be able to function within the team environment and to get along on the job. They start to gel or have some cohesion as a team. They start viewing themselves as a team instead of a bunch of individuals. And performance starts picking up. Everybody kind of starts to know their role. They start to know who they can go to, who's responsible for what. They're building those relationships. And you, as the project manager, can start dialing back how much interaction you are directly giving the team. So you're less directive than you were before. Not to zero. You can't just turn the team loose and say, okay, now go. You still need to be involved. However, you are going to be involved much less. You can start doing low levels of delegation with the team because the team is starting to become self-sufficient. Finally, ideally, we get to the performance stage, performing. In this, the team has fully come together and are now excited again because they can see the project coming together, they can see completion coming together, they can see success in the future. Performance level increases even further. They have great dialogue and communication with each other, and you as the project manager can now start fully delegating responsibility to team members as appropriate because the team is fully functional. You then can become more of a mentor than a director. You can start helping develop your team. You can provide them opportunities to develop and to support them, but you're not having to tell them how to do things and be nearly as prescriptive because they're capable of handling that on their own. Now, again, as I mentioned back on slide 1 of this presentation, we can't assume that every team is going to go through every one of these stages. We also can't assume this is always going to flow linearly. I have seen cases where you'll kind of progress a ways and then you'll slide back. You may be beginning to get into the norming stage and things are getting better, but then something happens that causes a disruption in the team and it slides back into a time of conflict. One thing that can do this very easily is if new personnel get injected into the team halfway through. And this is pretty common in corporate scenarios. Teams have to change sometimes due to personnel issues, due to things beyond your control as a project lead. When new people get thrown into the project, they're not at the same stage that everybody else is that's been on the project now for 3, 5, 6, 8 weeks. They are coming back in at the forming stage, and that can cause the whole team to kind of slow down and even move backwards temporarily. So just understand that teams go through stages, and that you as the project manager, remember your big skill as a leader, as a project manager, is to accomplish work through individuals. We talked about that back in chapter 10, I believe. Accomplish work through individuals, not in an abusive way, but in an effective way. In order to do that, you have to help the team come together and reach its full potential, because ultimately that's not only good for them, it's good for you as the project manager. This slide somewhat summarizes the situation. It's actually a pretty good slide. So what we see here are the stages that happen within a team. You'll notice the solid line here. Let me highlight that, if I can make my highlight here a bit larger. The solid line is how the team actually gets work done. So this is their actual performance, and it kind of increases. Now in reality, there may be some negative dips here, but generally speaking, as you go along, the team continues to improve, and by the end is actually fully functioning as a team and working well. So this is the actual work performance. Now here's the part that's interesting. This is the team dynamic. Things start out well, but then things can often get much worse temporarily before they get better. The team will eventually start to feel like a team, but it's very rare for that to happen without first going through a time of disliking the team and not getting along. The quicker you understand that as a project manager, the more quickly you're going to be able to realize that when your team is going through that disgruntled phase, that storming phase, it's not because you're necessarily doing anything wrong. It's not that you're a bad project manager. It's not that you have a bad team. It's simply this is the normal development of team dynamic, and you need to help your team through it. As conflict is going to occur on the project, as we've mentioned already, especially in the storming phase, we need to perhaps discuss the idea of conflict a bit more. Conflict should not be viewed as bad. Here on the slide it says it should not always be viewed as bad. I would go so far personally to say it should never be viewed as bad. Conflict itself is not the problem. Conflict is typically linked to the fact that people have opinions. And people are going to have opinions. I mean, that's natural. In fact, you want your team members to have opinions. You want them on your team because they are creative, free-thinking individuals with ideas. If you just want people that do exactly what you say and never interject any new information, you really don't want a team. You want machines. And that's not what a team is about. A team is about rich interaction to reach a better product. So since teams have opinions, and since opinions will lead to conflict, conflict is not really the issue. In fact, conflict can generate a better solution in the long run because it forces discussion. It forces defense and analysis of ideas in order to reach a better ultimate solution. What is damaging, however, is how conflict is sometimes handled. If it's not handled in a professional way, it can become abusive and destructive. So you, as the project manager, you need to foster an environment in which discussion and dissension are okay. It's okay if somebody disagrees with another person on the team. It should be okay if somebody disagrees with you as the project manager. I have found it's always best to allow the disagreement, hear the disagreement, and truly listen and weigh the facts. Now, ultimately, as the project manager, you will have the authority to make the decision, but that doesn't mean you should make the decision without fully understanding all input. Now, the types of things that can cause unnecessary conflict, however, are also important to realize. And I have a small list of these here. There's probably more, but a few of these are difficult to handle, but at the same time need to be addressed. One is tasks and assignments. If one person is being given all the bad jobs and another person is being given all the easy jobs, or one person is getting to select what they want to be responsible for on the project, but somebody else is being told what they're going to be responsible for, that can lead to conflict. It just leads to unfairness, inequity within the project management process. You need your management process to have all the signs of fairness. Schedule and budgets. If the schedule and the budgets become unrealistic, you're asking your team to do the impossible with limited resources, limited budget, limited time. That naturally escalates conflict. Sometimes it's unavoidable. Sometimes stress becomes high on a project due to things beyond your control. But do everything you can to minimize that, because it's just an unnecessary increase in conflict. If priorities become misaligned, you have multiple team members that see different aspects of the project or different features of the project as very different priority levels, that can lead to conflict. That's why it's always a good idea to have open discussion early in the project during the planning stages as to what the priorities are and how things are going to flow. Obviously, organizational issues, who reports to whom, who is in charge of what, that can lead to conflict as well. That one is hard to manage because obviously you have to put people as sub-leaders so that you have people that you can contact to find out what's happening on your project. You just need to try to be open and fair in the selection of who gets those roles and who doesn't, because it can lead to conflict. The last one, personal differences, is a little bit beyond your ability as a project manager to deal with. You can try, but you're typically not best friends to your team members. Okay, this is a work environment, not necessarily a friendship or a external to work environment that we're managing. And so therefore, if there's personal differences, political differences, religious differences, racial differences that are leading to conflict, those can be problems that can really be a big deal. And obviously they need to be addressed, and you need to direct some of your attention to them, but they're often perhaps beyond your ability as an individual project manager to deal with. I know from my personal experience working in industry, some lines are just not crossed. When I worked for Shell Oil, earlier in my career, religion was one of those. They had very, very, very strict rules that you simply did not discuss religion while at work, period. Even if it was a nice discussion, it didn't matter, you didn't do it. They just wanted certain topics to be dropped from the work environment. There's some wisdom in that because it can lead to unnecessary conflict in an environment that's really to be focused on the project. A few quick items related to ethical behavior. Now, ethics is incredibly important within the project team, within the corporate environment. I actually teach an ethics course within the engineering program, and I am a bit of a personal scholar focused in the area of ethical research. It's something that I find fascinating. Ethics is a must, and you need to do everything you can to instill and inject ethical ideas and ethical behaviors into your project team. That is going to really need to come from you, the project manager. If you are not demonstrating ethical behavior, ethical communication, ethical activity within the project, it's really unrealistic for you to expect your team to do so. What types of ethics am I really talking about here? I'm talking about correctly reporting performance, expenses, quality, data, communicating honestly and with integrity to your customer, even when things don't go well, having the ethical fortitude to know when something has to be redone or changed or reworked because it doesn't meet the standards or the safety required on the project, even if it's going to cost you in money and even if it's going to cost you in schedule, understanding that the ethical response is more important and you're not going to cut corners. These are the types of hard decisions that the team has to be willing to take, and you as the project manager, you have to be willing to lead in this area. So how do you instill ethical behavior within your team? First of all, you set the tone. That means they're going to be looking at you. Your team's going to be watching you as to how you behave. It takes one unethical action to basically destroy the trust in your team. There's a famous saying by Warren Buffett that it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to destroy it. That's a profound statement because it is true in so many aspects of life. People watch for us to mess up. Fair or not, that's the way it is. And so you as the project manager have to set the gold standard for ethical behavior in your team if you're going to expect them to behave so as well. So have a policy on ethical behavior. Discuss it in team member meetings. Discuss how important it is to you as the team lead. Consider conducting training sessions on how you should behave. Now, certain areas in corporate life today are very important related to this. For instance, diversity training, discrimination training, things like that. Having formal training to teach people what is and isn't allowed, what is and isn't proper, what needs to be considered. But it goes beyond those very important items. I'm not diminishing those are very important. But it goes beyond that too, to have training sessions on the need for ethics, the need for character within the team, and establish a non-threatening process of reporting. If a team member feels like something is happening that should not be happening, that some action is going on that should not be going on, you want them to report that to you. They shouldn't be scared of reporting it. You need them to report that to you. So have a system in place. And then when they do report it to you, make sure you follow up on that investigation. It's absolutely important that you thoroughly investigate all allegations. Because if something is reported as being unethical and you dismiss it, that dismissal basically just communicated, well, it's not really that important to be ethical. We talk about it a lot, but it really doesn't matter. I don't want to be bothered by it. You have to fully investigate and take that seriously. Now, this is not easy because often when ethical issues come up, tensions are really high. Something's going on that shouldn't be going on. That could mean personnel issues. That could mean success issues on the project. That could mean that the project itself is in jeopardy. And so all of that adds to the tension. This is where a good project manager will really shine. So as you read the text, think about the responsibilities of the project lead to set the ethical standard for the project. Okay, last slide for this summary. By the way, the book also has a good discussion on problem solving. We introduced the concept of problem solving in chapter 10 and mentioned how it's important for project managers to grow in that area. Chapter 11 has some ideas on problem solving, but they're pretty straightforward, and I will let you simply read those as you look over the text for this particular chapter. They also discuss time management, and I do want to highlight just a few things here because I have found these time management steps to be fairly aligned with what has worked well in my career. So I think that the book has some really good ideas here. The key to good time management is keeping all the nuanced tasks and objectives in front of you and that you're aware of them, not letting things slip through the cracks. So everything in this list is really about making sure you remain aware. In the first step, at the end of each week, the text is going to recommend that you identify goals for the following week. So you're basically planning a week in advance. What has to happen next week in order for things to stay on track? And do that at the end of this week when you have time to think about it before the actual rush of next week starts. Then, at the end of each day, make a direct list. Could be a paper to-do list, could be in your phone, could be on your laptop, however you do that. But make a direct list of what has to happen the next day. So you first plan a week in advance, now you're planning a day in advance to make sure that you're getting everything done. Then when you come in on a new day, read that to-do list very first thing. Remind yourself, this is what I concluded yesterday has to happen today, and then go after it. I have found personally that I like to put the most challenging tasks early in the day. I'm more effective and my productivity is higher early in the day. As the day wears on, I think I just kind of tire out. So by 2, 3, 4 in the afternoon, I'm not nearly as productive as I am at 9, 10 in the morning. I've learned that about myself, so I schedule my activities accordingly. Once you're in the day and you're working, do everything you can to control and manage interruptions. This is personally, I think, one of the biggest secrets to what makes a person extraordinarily productive and just okay. The extraordinarily productive person manages to stay on task. There's a few things that can destroy staying on task. One of those is multitasking. It is very difficult to do multiple things at once well. In fact, I'm not sure it's possible. People try it. People claim they're good at multitasking. But ultimately, you're going to do better work if you focus on one thing at a time and do it well to your full ability. In fact, there's a famous quote, I saw it on a t-shirt recently that made me laugh, that said, multitasking is doing lots of things poorly at the same time. That's a good definition of multitasking. You're far better off to focus on one thing at a time. Also, you need to set rules for yourself to eliminate possible interruptions. One rule that I like to set for myself, and it's pretty radical, but I try to only check my email once or twice a day. That means if somebody emails me at 1 o'clock, I might not check it again until the next morning. And they're going to simply have to wait, 15, 16 hours to get that response. But if I allow myself to be checking my email every 5, 6 minutes, or if I have the notice on my computer set so that I get a reminder every time a new email comes in, it simply destroys my productivity and I can't focus on the tasks at hand. So you'll have to decide what are the appropriate rules for you, but think that through. Learn to say no. You cannot do everything. In fact, trying to do too many things is a definite formula for failure. If you'll maybe remember back to your high school chemistry, you'll remember the concept of a catalyst. Okay, so a catalyst is something that helps a chemical reaction occur. A saying that I have internalized, this is a little quote that I've made for myself, that at least rings true for me, is that less is the catalyst for best. It's kind of a little rhyme, not a great rhyme, but it's something that I can remember. Less is the catalyst for best. the less I try to accomplish during a day, the better quality I can produce in those items. I only have kind of a certain amount of quality that I can do each day. If I spread that quality out among 50 tasks or 5 tasks, it makes a big difference. So you will have to again decide what's appropriate. Sometimes you can only manage this so much, but learn to say no when possible. Make effective use of waiting time. Downtime is huge. I catch myself doing this. In between tasks, I do a pretty good job of staying on focus when I'm on a task, but in between tasks, when I go and get a cup of coffee, something like that, I can end up easily spending 15, 20 minutes chatting in the hallway about something that wasn't that important instead of getting back to what I need to be doing next. Look at how much time during the day you are not effectively using and decide, is that how I want to use it? You only have 24 hours in a day. So would you rather use that time to get more done so that you have more free time in the evening with family, with friends, for things that really matter to you? Or do you like having that downtime during the day? It's your personal decision, but recognize that we all waste a lot of time without realizing it. Number 7 is an interesting one. Try to handle paperwork only once. There was a very interesting book a few years ago called Getting Things Done that was very famous, and it basically said any piece of paper, any activity that you can manage to accomplish within 2, 3, 4 minutes, something fairly short, you should just do then, get it done, put it away, and never look at that piece of paper again. Just do it. You don't want to have to manage the paper more than once. So if you get a request or a piece of paper that you have to do something with, and you say, well, I don't want to do it now, so I'm going to put it on a to-do stack for later. Later you come back to it, you get that piece of paper again, you say, well, right now is not a good time, I'll come back to it tomorrow. You're handling that same piece of paper multiple times. It would be much better to just get it done and eliminate it. And then finally, reward yourself when things go well. There needs to be payoff in this. And to me, the reward is, my goal is I want to be able to leave at 5 o'clock and not think about work. I want to be able to go home and have time with my family and do things that I really want to do. To me, that's an amazing reward, and I have a difficult time doing that if I'm not productive during the day. Okay, so this has been a summary of Chapter 11. Chapter 11 has a lot of rich material in it. Make sure you read through the chapter and ask questions if you have them.